Guess who's back? Back again. Marty's back. Tell a friend. That's right, in breaking news, Martavis Bryant has been reinstated for the upcoming NFL season, which is huge for the Steelers. So far in his career, he has 76 catches for 1,314 yards and 14 touchdowns. He's also training harder than he ever has been. There's a video circulating this week that he ran a 4.2740, which, as if he wasn't already scary enough, if he got even faster and put on even more muscle, it's just going to be scary for the league. Now that he is back, it might have an influence on the Steelers' draft plans this coming season, so let's talk the NFL draft. Well, in surprising news, there's a story going around that the Steelers are gauging other teams' interests in their plans to take DeShone Kizer in this year's draft, which is really interesting because the Steelers, Todd Haley was at his pro day at Notre Dame, and the Steelers have met with him multiple times. So this is a guy that they're potentially looking at taking with their first round pick. I still think that Jabril Peppers from Michigan is a guy that if he falls into their lap, I think they're going to take him. So I wouldn't read too much into the DeShone Kizer news, but it really lets you know how serious the Steelers are about taking a quarterback in this year's draft. This also caused me to look at Walter Football's mock draft for the Steelers this year. Mock drafts aren't something that you can read too much into because whenever one team makes a pick, that has a domino effect on at least the rest of the round. But I still like to look at the Steelers draft picks on Walter Football, and this is who they have the Steelers taking with all 8 of their draft picks. First off, in the first round, they have 3 possibilities for the Steelers with their first pick. They have DeShone Kizer, obviously because of the news circulating right now. They have Jabril Peppers, which obviously the Steelers have shown is a guy that they really are taking a serious look at. The third guy that Walter Football has for them is David Njoku, and he is a tight end from Miami. I think they might have thrown this pick in there for the first round with the rumors swirling that Ben wants them to take a tight end. I wouldn't read too much into it though. I think they'll take a tight end in this draft with the uncertainty of Ladarius Green, but I don't think it'll be until a couple rounds down the road from then. With their second round pick, they have the Steelers taking Chris Godwin, who's a wide receiver from Penn State. I don't think they're going to take a wide receiver in this draft, and I do think if they take a wide receiver, it won't be until the later rounds. So I'm not too sold on them taking a wide receiver in the second. In the third round, they have 2 picks in the third. Okay, so the first pick, they have them taking Jake Butt, who's a tight end from Michigan. And that would be a pretty good pick for them in the third round. That would address the tight end position. I think he could be a pretty good tight end. I know watching some Michigan games this year, the only question they had on him was his hands. But Sammy Coates was also a guy that a lot of people questioned his hands coming out of college. And, I mean, other than whenever he was dealing with his hand injuries during the season, at one point he was a tremendous deep threat for the Steelers. So, I mean, I would like that pick for them. For the Steelers' second, third round pick, they have them taking Carroll Phillips, who's an outside linebacker from the University of Illinois. I think that they need to address the pass rusher in the second round, possibly. Here's my opinion on pass rushing. If you have a pretty good pass rush for your team, then not only are you forcing the opposing quarterback to be uncomfortable, if you're forcing him to be uncomfortable, then he might be forced to throw some off-balance throws. You're making the quarterback have to think a lot more the more pressure that you put onto him. That's why if you have a good pass rush, you don't need an all-pro secondary. So I think your defense starts from your pass rush. So the Steelers need to get an edge rusher. If they don't in the first round, they need to address that in the second round and probably take a couple edge rushers in this draft. With their fourth round pick, they have them taking Eddie Vanderdoes, who is a defensive tackle from UCLA. This would add depth to their defensive line, and he's one of the top 5 defensive tackles in this year's draft. So that would be a pretty good pick for them in the fourth round if they can get him there. In the fifth round, they have them taking Marquez White, who's a cornerback from Florida State. I looked on NFL.com at his strengths and weaknesses, and going through his weaknesses, they say he opens on the first fake that he sees, which would be bad for a corner in the NFL, considering the wide receivers throw a lot of fakes at corners. They also say he has some balance issues, and he only has 11 career passes defended in college, so I'm not too sold on that pick. In the sixth round, they have the Steelers taking Samson Ebukam. I mean, this guy, he's quick off the line. He ran a sub 4.540 at the combine, and he has a 39-inch vertical. So, I mean, this guy is big, athletic. This would be a really good edge rusher pickup for the Steelers. And with their 7th round pick, they have the Steelers taking Trayvon Hester, who's a defensive tackle from Toledo. So going off of Walter Football's mock draft, that would give the Steelers 5 draft picks defensively and 3 draft picks offensively. I really do think it'll be 5 and 3. The only thing is, instead of a wide receiver, I could see them possibly taking a running back. I think they need to address that position. But overall, yeah, I do think 5 defensive players and 3 offensive players would be a pretty good draft for the Steelers. Now, for all my Pitt fans that I have watching the show, I decided to go through Walter Football's mock draft, and here's where they have the Panthers going in the draft. First off, in the 3rd round, they have Nate Peterman and James Conner both going in the 3rd. They have Peterman going to the LA Chargers, and they have Conner going to the Eagles. Peterman would be a good successor to Phillip Rivers. Conner would be a pretty good running back in the Eagles system. Shady McCoy was a running back for the Eagles before, and they really liked him out there. So I will say this much. Whoever gets James Conner in the draft, in my opinion, is probably getting a future All-Pro running back. Next up, they have Dorian Johnson going in the 4th round to the Los Angeles Rams, and Adam Bisnowaty going to the Arizona Cardinals in the 5th round. These guys could be starting offensive linemen in the NFL someday. They have really great careers at Pitt, really great ends to their careers at Pitt. One player that the site did not list that I think teams will look at drafting late, or at least call as soon as the draft ends, is Juan Price. He's a guy that's compared to Elvis Dumervil. I mean, he had 24.5 sacks over his last 2 seasons at Pitt, also finished 2nd in the FBS last season with 23 tackles for loss. So yeah, I mean, this guy could be a great edge rusher in the NFL, and I think teams are going to give him a call, at least bring him in and see what the kid's got. Now let's talk Pens Caps. So this is a rematch from last year's 2nd round. Yet again, the Washington Capitals President's Trophy winners. So I decided to go back on HockeyReference.com and see what I could find in regards to last year's series. First off, going through the Penguins. Hopefully the Penguins are getting Chris Kunitz and Carl Hagelin back in this round, which would be huge because Hagelin had the most points on the team last year in this round with 7. Kunitz also contributed 4 points. Having both of those guys back would be huge contributions, hopefully. This is also going to be the first true test to see what the Penguins are made of without Chris Letang. Chris Letang led the team in time on ice last year in this series. He also registered 3 points. Schultz, Cole, and Brian Rust all were pointless in last year's series. I would look for them to contribute in this series. Sid and Gino also held to 2 points apiece, so they really need to step up their production this year. Last year was also the emergence of the HBK line in this series. They combined for 18 points. So these, they need a line that they could rely on in this series. I think it'll end up being Malkin's line. Really don't know what's going to happen with Sid's line because they had Sheary up there. Now it looks like they're putting Hornquist up there. But I do think Malkin's line has a chance to have the biggest impact in this coming series. Now you look at Washington. Like I said, they won the President's Trophy again. You look at the right side of their defense. They have John Carlson, Matt Niskanen, and Kevin Shattenkirk. That's pretty scary. You still have that first line of Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, and TJ Oshie, which is also scary. But, I mean, if you look at it historically, Alex Ovechkin still hasn't played in the Eastern Conference Final. Barry Trotz still hasn't coached in the Eastern Conference Final. That doesn't mean that they won't this year. I mean, I do think they have pretty good chances to make the Eastern Conference Final. But they're still not as fast as the Penguins. And if you look at the first round, the Penguins scored 21 goals in 5 games, and the Capitals scored 18 goals in 6 games. So the goal production's still higher for the Penguins, and like I said, the Penguins are still just a little bit faster. That's why I believe the Penguins are going to take this series in probably 6 or 7. They took it in 6 last year, so wouldn't be surprised to see it go, almost a full series again this year. I don't really have much to say about the Pirates this week. Their pitching's improving, their fielding's getting worse. I mean, they're leading the MLB with 19 errors right now. And Neil Huntington's talked about possibly bringing in an external option to help out with the outfield right now during Marte's suspension. Marlon Byrd is a guy that I've seen mentioned they would need to talk him out of retirement, yet he is a guy that, if you recall, he hit a pretty juicy home run off of Johnny Cueto in the wild card game a few years ago. However, I don't see that happening. If they are looking at a cheap option, there's a guy that they could trade for that it wouldn't take a lot to bring him in. He was also a Pirate before. He also hit 131 career home runs as a Pirate. And through 16 games fielding in right field in AAA so far this year, he only has 1 error. And that man is none other than, let's see who we got here. Oh, could it be? Could we see the return of Pedro Alvarez? Probably not. But I'm a Pedro Alvarez apologist, so I dare to dream. Now this week's Stick to Sports social media segment is not about the quantity, it's about the quality, and we got some quality questions from you guys this week, so let's dive into them. First up, we have a question from Drew, and Drew asks, if the Steelers were to draft a player from Pitt, who do you think they would draft most likely? Well, Drew, hypothetically, if the Steelers take Jabril Peppers in the first round and they do want to address the quarterback situation at some point in the draft, I think Nate Peterman would be the perfect pick for them. John Gruden says that this guy, out of all the quarterbacks in this year's draft, is maybe the most ready to play in the NFL. So, if the Steelers can get him after the first round, and he's a guy that could take over whenever Ben's ready to hang up the cleats, then sure, why not? There's an interesting stat that's been circulating from ESPN this week, and it's that over the last 15 drafts, Pitt actually leads all college teams with the most draft selections who have become all pros. You're looking at two of them over my shoulder here, Larry Fitzgerald and Aaron Donald. A couple guys out of this year's Pitt class in the NFL draft could possibly be all pros. So, get while getting's good, am I right? Our next question comes from Jared, and Jared asks, what role player do you think needs to have the biggest impact for the Penguins to beat the Capitals? We got to look at it a few ways. Brian Rust contributed a lot in the first round this year, and he's a guy that was scoreless in last year's series. So, I think they need to rely on him having some production in this series. You're also getting Chris Kunitz and Carl Hagelin back, who I said combined for about 11 points in last year's series. So you need them to, contribute if they're coming back. And as I said, Chris Letang was a guy that the Penguins relied heavily on in the playoffs last year, especially in the series against Washington. So, Ole has really made some great progress ever since he's come back. So I do think that he needs to continue to try to be the best defenseman on the ice for the Penguins. That would be huge in this series. So yeah, those are just a couple of the guys that I think the Penguins need to rely on as far as role players go to really step up in this series and help them get to the Eastern Conference Finals again. Our next question comes from Ryan, and Ryan asks, with Dale Jr. retiring at the end of 2017, what will NASCAR have to do to maintain fan interest? Well, Ryan, I think there's a couple things they could do. One would be to incorporate the right turn. Sorry, I got a little bold there. In all seriousness, though, they need to look at this from a marketing standpoint of this is the end of an era. So you need to show what the future of NASCAR is going to be. So they need to market some of the younger drivers, and that will really get the fans excited about the future of NASCAR. They also need more exciting and shorter tracks like Martinsville and Bristol. The 1.5 mile cookie cutter tracks, I think they're really boring. So some shorter tracks would make the sport a little more exciting. But yeah, those are some of the things I think they could do to help the sport going forward now with Dale Jr. retiring. Our final question comes from Mark, and Mark is asking this week, who would you rather spend a day with, Jesse James or Heath Miller? Well, this answer is actually kind of easy for me. I would say Heath Miller. This guy had a long career with the Steelers. He was there with a lot of teammates in a lot of different situations, so I would just love to hear the stories that this guy has. He was a guy that didn't talk to the media that much, or at least you didn't hear a lot from him. Just a real humble guy, it seems like. But no, I'm sure he would have some great stories about his career as a Steeler and some great stories about other guys on the team. So yeah, I would definitely spend a day with Heath Miller. That about does it for this week's show. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys next week about the Steelers draft selections. But first, before I leave, I would like to point out this remarkable shirt that I'm wearing. I'm going to stand up and show you guys a little preview of this. Okay, so this is a Le'Veon Bell t-shirt, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and this is actually from the newly renamed Pittsburgh Clothing Company. They make some great t-shirts, so if you're looking to stock up on some Pirate stuff right now, they have some great Pirate shirts. They have a couple great Pitt shirts. They have some great Steelers shirts. If you're looking to stock up for the Penguins Stanley Cup chase, definitely check out their selection. So yeah, check out their site on the link posted below, pghclothing.com. And I'll see you guys next week. Today's show is brought to you by Shaw's Bait Company. For more information, please visit their Facebook page.